Hi everybody, welcome to class. I hope that this works for everybody. We're just going to try to work our way through the slides today, pretty much like we are in class, and I'm still working with a new tool here, so you're going to have to bear with me just a little bit as I get comfortable with it. Also, all my kids are home because it's a snow day, so I could get interrupted, so hopefully that won't happen, but we'll see. Right, so first off, today is the day. Your research papers are due. I have 1 or 2 papers that have already been submitted. I hope that everybody gets their papers in just fine today. If you have any problems, let me know. Just remember, you know, if I have any challenges with opening up your file, I might be contacting you. I'm available today, all day long. If you need anything, you can shoot me an email. Today, what I want to do is I want to go through the various diagnoses of different developmental disabilities. It's really, for some of you that picked a particular topic that we're going to cover today, this is going to be very familiar stuff, so I don't think you'll have too much trouble with our content. All right, so just remember on Wednesday we have the speakers from Augie Access coming. I got interview questions from about 17 of you. So there are 3 of you that I did not get contact from. Please remember that those kind of things I am asking you to do are considered part of your attendance and participation grade, just like today's work and the forum is going to be. I do keep track of all of those things, and so I don't want you to be surprised if you get to your final grade and you discover that that grade isn't quite what you expected it to be. I am looking for you to do those things. I have shared those questions, and so the ones that I got were fantastic, and I have them ready to go, so we'll be with our group on Wednesday. Please be reading chapter 15 for Friday. Oh, and then the other big thing is I've really been going back and forth about our quiz, and I don't like having it when I have it, but I feel like it's kind of where it fits the best. So I thought I would just put it out there for you guys to vote on. So I have a quiz, or I have a Moodle site, Google quiz for you. So if you go to the link on Moodle, you'll see the link, and I want you to vote. Everybody who's in class can vote one time, and then I'll let you know what the results are when we come together on Wednesday. Spring break is, even with our weather today, almost here. So, all right. Covering this topic again, we've hit on this before. The largest and oldest organization of professionals that work with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities is the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, AAIDD. Remember that you'll want to have this link as part of your service learning project if you haven't included it already. Okay, just a final reminder for you there. So let's talk about our topic. In terms of cognitive disabilities, the things that we're going to cover today are Down syndrome, Fragile X, cerebral palsy, fetal alcohol syndrome, and traumatic brain injury. All of these are associated with a range from mild to severe cognitive impairments. Just like you hear people talk about an autism spectrum or a learning disabilities spectrum, the same really can be said for those with a cognitive disability. There is a range from more mild and moderate impact to more significant or severe. There's differences in the causes or etiology, the prevalence rate of each of these disabilities, and then of course the physical characteristics. Get my mouse to work for me. Probably the developmental disability that many people in the general public are most familiar with is Down syndrome. Down syndrome is the result of an extra chromosome being part of the makeup of an individual. It is our most prevalent chromosomal condition. Right now, prevalence rate is 1 in 700. Individuals who have this disability often have some very similar characteristics in terms of their facial appearance. There's actually creases in the palm that are consistent with this disability. The shape of the eyes. There can be some health issues that are consistently common. Poor muscle tone, being shorter in height are all things that you might see with an individual who has Down syndrome. As I alluded to, there are also a number of health issues that are frequently aligned to having this condition. Hearing loss, not unusual, other eye and ear problems, and heart defects. All of those things can be seen in an individual who has Down syndrome or not. Again, we don't know exactly why this chromosomal error occurs, but we do know that older mothers are at risk. Fragile X, like Down syndrome, this is also a genetic disorder. There's a particular gene that doesn't make a protein. It is an inherited disorder, and it is the most commonly caused inherited disability. It can affect males and females, but males are going to have a more significant impact from this particular genetic anomaly. About 1 in 5,000 males are born with this syndrome. It does have some social and behavioral problems, which can look and seem to be autism or autism spectrum-like. So not making eye contact, those stimulation behaviors like hand flapping, moving, and that impulsivity are all things that you might see of someone who is Fragile X, has Fragile X. Also, though, they may be an individual who has Fragile X and has autism at the same time. All right, here's a video I want you to watch right now on Fragile X. I'm going to change it back over to, nope, didn't want to do that. Let's go this way. I want to go that way. And I've got a video for you.
You find out the diagnosis, and there is no time to pull the covers over your head.
Hang on. I'm just going to try to make this a little bigger. I've got a certain window I can work with here with the...
And I clearly know
this is it. That's how you're going to see it.
Different than when I anticipated it to be.
I never heard of Fragile X until my sister, she has 3 boys, and 2 of them have Fragile X syndrome. If my sister's a carrier, I could be a carrier.
We know now that about 1/3 of all children with Fragile X syndrome will also have autism.
I know in Mexico a lot of kids are just kind of hidden away. It's not very often that you see a family who has a disabled child out in public. Garrett at this stage I don't think knows that he's any different. But I don't think that will last. I think once he gets into school and gets a certain age and starts to develop more cognitively, he'll know that he's terribly different. And that will break my heart.
I wanted him to be normal. And if I have any regrets, is that I did not let myself love him at that moment. Just say, I love you just the way you are. And I hope he forgives me for ever thinking I wanted to do
All right, so let's look at the next slide I've got here. This is on cerebral palsy. A number of you wrote your papers on CP. This is our most common motor disability in childhood. The causes of it, there are 3 different times in development that a child may have abnormal brain development or damage that affects their ability to control their muscles. And so we talk about prenatal, obviously that's in the womb, perinatal as they're being born, and then postnatal after birth, meaning it's acquired. 90% of the cases, as you can see from the slide, occur in that prenatal and perinatal stage. Postnatal, head injuries, other illnesses can be the reason why an individual may have cerebral palsy. Again, just like we talked about with a cognitive impairment and other things having a spectrum, there are a spectrum for muscle difficulties. It can be everything from very mild, you may not even realize an individual has cerebral palsy, to more significant or very obvious, such so that an individual maybe can't walk without supports, or they need to use a wheelchair, they need supports for eating, their speech is very unintelligible, and that is not uncommon at all. 1 in 323 children is the prevalence rate for cerebral palsy. When an individual has cerebral palsy, it's not an automatic that they will also have an intellectual disability, but you can see the prevalence rate there is about 40% that may also have an intellectual disability. 35% also have epilepsy. For whatever reason, more children who are Black than white are affected with this particular disability. And about 60% of these individuals can walk independently. There's numbers of treatments that are out there anymore for cerebral palsy that involve Botox injections, which is kind of an interesting notion, but they actually are used to help muscles do certain things and relax. And there's also surgeries that children can have that work to strengthen muscles, lengthen muscles, stretch muscles, so that they're more able to control them. Some risk factors for cerebral palsy is that we have low birth weight, premature birth, disruption of oxygen, either pre-birth or in the process of being born, and then infections with the mother while she's pregnant or as the child is being born. Any of those can actually be a causation or a risk factor for for cerebral palsy. Okay, here are some types of cerebral palsy. What you're seeing here is basically a slide that shows how it affects different parts of the body. You have monoplegia, which is just one limb, usually an arm. Hemiplegia, which affects one side of the body. That would be the leg, the trunk, the arm. Diplegia is either affecting both arms or both legs. And then quadriplegia, which affects all 4 limbs. All right, let's talk about fetal alcohol syndrome. I think all of you have probably had some exposure to the guidelines. If you're ever in a grocery store or any place that sells alcohol, you'll see signs up everywhere. If you're in a restaurant or a bar, there's some sort of a sign that says, it's dangerous for a pregnant woman to drink alcohol. That's obviously political and legislative efforts to ensure that people are informed about the risks for drinking alcohol and being pregnant. This is the one intellectual disability that is 100% preventable. Obviously, during pregnancy, what occurs is that the mother takes in alcohol and it passes to her unborn baby. The prevalence rate we're not exactly sure on because reporting is somewhat suspect. Many individuals who are born with this disability we don't discover until later in life. Sometimes their parents are significantly impacted themselves by chemical use, and so we don't have good data to tell us exactly how many children are actually affected with fetal alcohol. Right now, the CDC has that rate as 0.3% out of 1,000 children. 2 to 5 of 100 children in US and Europe have FAS-related characteristics. It's not a clinical diagnosis. Here's some prevalence percentage of binge drinkers among women who reported alcohol use. This is kind of a way to look at the potential, because if you have women who are drinking and they're in the ages of 18 to 44, obviously they're in childbearing years, and so there is that great potential with someone who overdrinks, binge drinks, that they may have a child who's affected by the use of alcohol. So you can see yellow is the lower rates, and that kind of burnt brown color is the highest rates. And unfortunately, South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, our region has a very high rate of binge drinking women who are in that childbearing age range. Oops. There we go. Sorry. don't mean to give everybody motion sickness. So obviously people should abstain from alcohol if they are specifically trying to get pregnant. And then if you are pregnant, you should avoid it altogether because there's no safe levels for drinking alcohol. There's some belief out there that a glass of wine is not harmful. It's really, really just unclear what the effect is. And everyone is different and everyone's makeup is different. So one drink for you might be as dangerous as 5 drinks for someone else. And so our society is working to help people understand, medical knowledge tells us we don't know what the safe level is, so people should abstain. And then, certainly there are times when women become pregnant and they don't know it and they've had alcoholic drinks. And what we're told is that it's important to stop as soon as you find out because it decreases those chances of having problems if you stop drinking. There's a lot of effort out there to support individuals who can't stop drinking while they're pregnant. Everything from supportive living arrangements, counseling, and all the way up to putting women in jail to try to keep them from continuously drinking while they're pregnant. So there are some different aspects to fetal alcohol syndrome. The other disorders that are associated with this spectrum are alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorders, alcohol-related birth defects, such as problems with your heart, your kidneys. Again, the problems are going to range in severity because it is a spectrum. Behaviors can be impacted, learning can be impacted, and physical abilities can be impacted. Okay, if I can get my next slide to come up. I'm kind of stuck. Why doesn't it want to move? There we go. All right, some characteristics for fetal alcohol syndrome. There are frequently abnormal facial features. I have some pictures in the next couple of slides, so you'll see some examples. Smaller than typical head size, shorter than average, low body weight, coordination, often see hyperactivity, difficulty with attention, poor memory, speech and language delays, impulsivity. You can see that there's some consistencies across the different intellectual delays. Remember we talked about height with individuals with Down syndrome. We talked about some physical motor challenges, again with individuals with Down syndrome. That's not unique to one disorder. And you can also see that because of how this disorder manifests itself, it could potentially be missed or inappropriately diagnosed as a different disability. Because there isn't any test. You can't take a blood test. You can't study chromosomes because it's caused by something. So sometimes it's not correctly diagnosed. Here is a drawing of an individual who would have some of the effects of fetal alcohol syndrome. Again, that smaller head, skin folds, nasal bridge affected, a little bit with the groove between your nose and upper lip is somewhat flattened out, indistinct. So here's also some photographs, and you can see that groove very clearly in the young girl in the upper right corner there. And also the little one right below her. I think it's pretty evident there. So, okay. And then these are the signs that you probably have seen out in the community. Again, those are the kind of things that are often legislated and mandated, that any place that sells alcohol has to have these kind of warnings up. Obviously, it's our intent to prevent children from harm, but it also is it is a political issue because it talks about a burden on society for a disorder that you can potentially prevent. And so everybody wants to do what they can to keep that in check. All right, traumatic brain injury. The cause of that is some sort of injury to your head that disrupts its normal functioning. There's 2 different kinds of ways to acquire traumatic brain injury. You can have an open head injury or a closed head injury. There is so much conversation today about concussions and the impact of repeated concussions over time. I would say that this slide doesn't even begin to capture, I think, the prevalence that we are starting to understand with individuals, young individuals who have been in sports for a long time and have had some repeated injuries that maybe were and weren't diagnosed with concussions, but that long-term impact to the brain. Again, this is an area that we're learning more and more about all the time, and I would not be surprised to see as we move further down the line with our understanding that it start to impact some of the offerings, some of these high contact sports that injuries can happen in. It's already impacting in terms of care and equipment and post-injury care, but I think that it's probably even going to get more complicated as we move farther along. All right, so the challenges with a traumatic brain injury, or the prevalence rates, it's a major cause of death and disability. Traumatic brain injury causes in children 0 to 14, 55% attributed to fall, 24% blunt object, and 3% to assault. The rates of TBI are increasing. Now it's 0 to 4, 2,200 instances out of 100,000. 5 years to 14 years is 900 instances out of 100,000. These are the active years. This is when kids are moving and they're learning to ride bikes and they're jumping on playground equipment, and things happen. Kids fall, they hurt themselves. I don't want people to think that I'm advocating everybody run on a bubble wrap and not get out and play, but it's just a fact of life. Just as we talked about with the fetal alcohol and women who are childbearing, the binge drinking rate correlates to kids with FAS. Here, these active years are the times when a lot of traumatic brain injuries will happen. Some of the things that we know we need to watch for after kids have had a head injury is what you see right here on the slide. Drowsiness. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as convulsions or seizures, just that confusion, being restless, unusual behaviors, anything that kind of fits this should get people's concern up. They should have a flag in their head that maybe we need to get this looked at. And then it's interesting. I mean, it used to be, shake it off. You can get back in the game, or, well, you missed the game today, you can play tomorrow. But now we know that it takes a lot longer for the brain to settle, the brain to heal, and, and things that we do every day. Spending time on the computer can be really challenging to an individual with a concussion. So effects of a traumatic brain injury, again, a lot of different effects can affect your thinking, sensations, language, and emotion. I had the opportunity to work with an individual quite a long time ago now who had spinal meningitis, and he was married and he had children, and the long-term effect of the meningitis is that it took hold in his brain, and I know I'm not technically explaining this correctly, but basically it affected almost every aspect of his brain. He needed assistance to walk. He did not have a ability to recognize family members any longer. He remembered basic functions of life, but that was pretty much it for him. So it was quite debilitating, and and that was an acquired disability. It's not unusual that we see young people having bad things happen, car accidents and other injuries, and those acquired disabilities are not only life-changing, but their range of impact can be very severe. Again, just like with fetal alcohol syndrome, it is preventable in many cases. It is not 100% preventable because, the phrase accidents do happen. But we talk about the things that we do to ensure that we can do our best to prevent injury. Car seats go a long way to preventing injury to younger children, using your seat belts. Helmets. I know growing up, nobody wore a helmet when I was a kid, but I had a friend who actually had a pretty significant brain injury riding his bike. But nobody had helmets, and they just didn't even sell them. New families with new babies suddenly discover they need to baby-proof their house. You want to avoid things that you can fall over and hurt, and then you know, supervising kids when they're out getting that play that's really important to them, because you want them to be out moving and getting that physical activity, but you know, they don't necessarily identify the things that are unsafe for them, and that's why, you know, you probably need to go along with them when they head to the park until they reach a certain age that they can be safer. So here's a chart that, and I'm sorry, I know my camera's a little bit over that, but it just basically puts all these disabilities together for you today, with the etiology or cause, the prevalence rates, and then the characteristics. You can see the differences across the different disabilities. Again, as I said before, there is some consistencies across these different disabilities. Some are preventable. Fetal alcohol syndrome is 100% preventable, and others are genetically linked, and you do not know until you have a child, you know, that could occur. So that's pretty much the extent of what I wanted to cover today. Just some things for review, and what I'm going to tell you is these are going to turn into your questions for your forum. So I will put those on the forum as soon as I post this video today. The other thing I want to remind you about is your service learning project. I am seeing a fair number of emails from students, but I know I am not seeing emails from everyone. And if you are having trouble getting to your service learning project, I need you to talk to me because you're running out of time. Basically, it's this week, and then we have spring break, which of course you can get hours in if you're scheduled and you're here in town. And then the week after, your paper's pretty much due right after a week and a half after we come back. So you've got to have this done. So if you're in trouble, I need you to visit with me. Wednesday we have our guest from Augie Access. That is all we will be doing for that day, so there's no reading for that day. But on Friday we are going to cover chapter 15 on transition, as well as chapter 6 and 7 of Rosemary. The forum and the forum questions are out there for Rosemary. Please go onto Moodle and do the quiz voting. I want you to vote for whether you want the quiz to be the Monday after spring break or the Wednesday after spring break. Remember, the whole reason I said I wanted to do it on Monday was because I didn't want it to be too close to your midterm, but I'm going to leave you guys the choice. Okay, so you tell me what you want to do. All right, so that's pretty much what I have for you today. Don't forget to go and do the forum, and I will see you on Wednesday. Take care.